Did you think you were watching some sort of documentary about the heritage of craft?
You're not bloody getting your knitting out here.
I'd expect Love Island to have more accuracy than this.
I think Love Island probably does. Hello and welcome to Yarn Library Podcast with me, Adam Cleveley.
And me, Georgia Denham. Actually, I'll do it right. One week, I'll do it right. I promise.
We're both way too high energy to be able to do this morning.
Yeah.
And also, you've written the agenda today.
Yes, I have. It's very neat.
Normally it's me. I write the agenda and then I turn over the page and forget all about it. So
I was wondering. I always thought it was my fault, Adam, but maybe it's you.
I'm supposed to be a professional at sticking to agendas. Or agenda. I can't remember what the plural of agenda is.
I thought you paid people to do that for you at this point.
It's so very true. In my completely out of touch life. Sorry, we had a complaint about that.
We did. We will not get into that first because
No, it's not on your agenda.
No, it's not, because I wanted to save it for a separate podcast. There we go. Anyway, the last week has been quite an adventure.
I've had the best. Obviously, if you're listening to this and you're watching it, you can see my energy. I definitely haven't come down yet from the most amazing 3 days.
There's so much energy from Adam and from the nipple tassels on the side when I arrive, and then I walk in and there's just like a whole selection. I feel like I've traveled and yet I've not.
So I wonder whether anyone won't have seen this, and I might need to explain. But
rather than me just going, oh yeah, nipple tassels. So Adam.
So I've been in Munich over the weekend. I was at Munich Knits. How to describe Munich Knits? Well, it's kind of a smallish yarn fair. It's not the biggest I've been to at all, but I wasn't going to Vogue this year, and I thought, I wanted to see other yarn festivals outside the UK. So I went to Munich. The yarn festival itself is just absolutely amazing, but what was incredible was the people that I met, and I just fell in with the most amazing group of people. It was just ridiculous. So there were some people that I really, really wanted to meet. Like, number one on my list is I've chatted with Zandy Peters so much, and I really wanted to meet him in real life. But the crew that he was with and the crowd that he was with was just the most fun. It turned out the Yarn Festival was opposite the biggest brothel in Munich, and so which none of. I just totally wasn't prepared for. And it is visually arresting. It is a very large red building. Anyway, this led to all sorts of banter and confusion whilst we were knitting and drinking one evening before the festival. And then we started talking about Game of Wool as well. We are going to come on to Game of Wool. We were all going to dinner with Kay Fassett as well, a presentation by him and dinner with him. And
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, sorry, that's a minor detail. That's not where my fun was. I'm sorry,
Have
George.
I not picked up on this? What?
But then the two sort of worlds collided, and someone suggested, well, why don't we set ourselves a challenge of making nipple tassels over dinner, and that's our own little game of wool. And that's what we did. So we gave ourselves the following day to do whatever shopping. I mean, everyone else, they pretty much had like half an hour in their lunch break. Some people actually had to miss their lunch break in order to get the materials to be able to knit the nipple tassels. And then that's what we did over dinner. That was our activity. We played our own little game of wool. And I suppose whilst knitting the nipple tassels was a fun exercise and was just creatively enjoyable, it was the atmosphere around it as well as the people and just the attitude and the joy, the pure joy. Everyone just was having fun with something that was so freeing. And I was reflecting on it thinking, the idea that you get to create something that, when you think about people crafting over dinner or crafting in a serious environment, you think about the only people that's acceptable for is children. Why do you give them something to do at a table that isn't joining in a conversation? And I mean, have your own debates about whether or not you think that's right. But it's because it's stimulating, partly distracting, all the rest of it.
I definitely knit at dinner tables. I've given up on trying to appease the Cambridge elite. I just sit at formal dinners now and just knit.
I think, obviously, I think it's the right thing to do. Kay Fassett called it out as well in the talk. Like, I can see people knitting here tonight, and that's fabulous.
Adorable.
It was acknowledged, and you're in a group of crafters, that's going to be acceptable. But it was just pure, unadulterated fun. So
it was not the official event. This was your like rogue fringe activity at the Kay Fassett.
Yeah, so there might have been, I guess, 100, 150 people there in the audience. He was giving a talk. He started his talk, and because it was all about colour, he wanted to really show it. There was a huge screen. Once he got talking and once he opened up the slides, all the lights went off. I knitted for a while. I've set myself a big physical thing to do. So I had to get through it. And then I dropped a stitch. in my super fluffy one. I was like, I can't do this. And then after about 5 minutes, I looked around behind me and I could see that Zandy was still going away. I was like, I can't stop. So I was feeling for, and I did it all by touch. I picked up the stitch and I was able to keep going.
Yeah.
And I finished what I needed to. But there was an hour of knitting literally in pure black. One of the ladies had glow in the dark yarn as it happened.
That's so good.
For her project. And so she was much better off than the rest of us.
Oh my goodness. Every time I drop a stitch in the dark, because I knit a lot in the cinema, concerts, all this kind of thing. I was sat at the theatre a while ago with my dad and got my knitting out, and he didn't know I knit in the theatre. And he was like, "You're not bloody getting your knitting out here, are you?" He's not quite as croaky as that, but he's very northern. And I said, "Yeah, but it's fine. I've got my protocol. It's okay." And sure enough, my dad is he's a sensitive audience member, right? I did not bother him. But the knitting in the dark, I've forgotten what the name of it is, but there's a kind of an idea from the disabled community sometimes that are hacks or things from the disabled community that actually non-disabled people could really learn from. So I remember, like, for an example, if you fill a glass of water, I remember learning a tip that actually if you put your finger over the top of the glass and you just fill until the water hits your finger, then you know you're not going to fill the glass too much. And whenever I drop stitches, I think about like that there's such a huge community of knitters who are blind or partially sighted and are so much working by touch all the time. So yeah, every time I drop a stitch, I'm like, okay, I don't need light for this. It's fine. And then I'll figure it out. And it's true. You can do it.
It's absolutely true, because what I was doing, I had this pattern repeat at one point. It was knit one, then cast off 8 or 9. The fact that I get confused about it now gives you an idea of how much of a problem it was. But you lose count. Obviously, you lose count, because who can count to 9 when they're knitting? But again, it was then down to, okay, I've got to feel my way through this. And you can feel the individual stitches. If you're going to talk about having sensitive touch, something you can do.
Knitting by touch and knitting by material. I'd love to talk about that in a future episode. But to be honest, I would really love to get someone to talk to us about it who, I've got friends who are in research on disability and disability history. And I would love to talk to someone who could talk about actually the really rich, amazing history around craft and making and disability. So yeah, we should talk about that in future. Let's look at our list. Munich knits. Do you have any more to talk about Munich knits? I mean, obviously lots.
I mean,
you can pepper it through.
I would just go on forever about Munich knits, and lots of people have commented on the post that
Do
I've made on
you speak
Instagram.
German?
Ein bisschen. Nein. Oh my God, that was something else that happened. So I went into a class, and I really, really wanted to take a class with Melanie Berg and shawl shapes, because it's something that I really struggle with, is understanding all the different construction techniques.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy 100 different patterns and study them. She was giving a talk on how you create all the different shapes and so on. So I turn up to the class. I'm the last one in the door. I mean, I was on time, but everyone else was there. And she said, "Do you realise that this class is taught in German?" And I just sort of stood there like a rabbit in the headlights for a minute and said, "That's fine. I'm going to make it through." I haven't spoken German in 20 years, so it was a very difficult one. And my German was like school level German. The first terrifying thing that happened, so obviously it was very difficult for me to keep up, and I wasn't sure I was going to understand. And then what happened is we were going round the room, and everyone had to introduce themselves, say, "Who are you? Where do you come from? And what do you like knitting?" in German. And everyone else went around. I was like, right to the end, I was like, "Ich heiße Adam. Ich wohne in Cambridge in die Nähe von London." I was like, what can I remember?
Ich bin in Berliner.
Ich habe 3 Kinder. Like, I was just leaning on like what little sentences. I like going to the cinema on Thursdays. That's all that I can get into my... Everyone else has got this rich tapestry of things they're describing. But then after that, I realized what I can do is turn on Google Translate on my phone. And all of a sudden,
it's bloody good.
And I could understand a lot of what, plus the context and the visual aids. Obviously, she's got all of her shawls there she's talking through. It was phenomenal. And I sat through a 3-hour German lecture.
Wow.
I was exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic. And I've come away from it. There's a design I've been working on, really been frustrated with how to create it. Melanie totally unlocked that for me. It was game-changing, so I'm super thrilled.
Amazing. I saw your story on it about you using Google Translate, because half of my PhD is in a computer science department, and so I'm around people who are especially working on AI and human interaction with AI. I'm kind of aware of how powerful it's getting within the sort of common use.
Used as a technical language, but it's fine because there aren't that many technical words, and so your ear picks them up or you know what they are when she's going to be talking about making one or making two.
Yeah.
It's easy. I think I'm done with Munich knits. I say that, and
For
then
now.
you can reuse that clip against me.
That's fine. So next thing, bar gate, which isn't bar gate, which isn't really a gate. It's bar fairy door. Okay, so for the eagle-eyed of you last week, when Adam gave his dramatic reading of a wonderful passage that was very fitting, very relevant to what we were talking about last week. There was some fruity language in the middle. The moment when I wasn't expecting you to say it, and it came out. You said the word. And Adam knew it was going to be on the podcast. It was fine. And then as a comedic lift, because it was like, Luca's mother is and where are the pine nuts? It was just hilarious. And I thought that I would put one of our signature mehs on the edge, which I would like to take this moment to say that is an actual Shetland sheep.
Of course it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't expect anything else.
So I was going to put the Shetland sheep on it. And then I'm afraid to say that our software let us down again, because everything was pristine, in place. And then I did also add some elevator music during the drawing section. And it didn't like that there were two clips in at the same time and bugged out and deleted the other one. It was like cat and mouse between these two clips. And I thought that I'd got it sorted, exported the audio, then was listening back with my husband because he hadn't listened to the episode yet. And then the bar didn't happen. It was like all of the excitement and stress and pressure of the last couple of weeks and editing all just fell on me in that moment. And I burst into tears. And I was like, oh my God, I've cancelled Adam. And I know that you're all going to be thinking, gosh, she's so like, this doesn't matter. But I was so sad that you did not get to hear how funny it was with the bar. And then I sent Adam a text kind of going, look, I'm really sorry. I'm not sure if we need to delete the episode or not. I need your grown-up opinion on what this situation means. And then you replied back saying, oh, I'm with Sandy Peters at the moment and we're having a very good time. I've had a lot of beers. I'll look at it in the morning, but I'm sure it's fine. You're all good. And so you really did ground me. You did ground me in that moment.
The thing is, I know, and I think there are very few people that understand the stress of editing and knowing that you're putting it out to a large audience.
Yeah.
And it is a big audience, and it's unlimited, really. You never know how big it might get or how many people might listen to it over time. It's
the permanence of it as well.
It is, exactly. There's a very, very difficult thing to cope with, and my coping strategy is largely to try and forget about it. And I don't manage that all the time, but it's similar. You know, I had half an hour of footage from my mini game of wool that I did.
Munich knits, back on the Munich
knits. It didn't take long, did it? But that was 30 minutes of footage, and my challenge is to make 2 engaging Instagram reels from that. And engaging really means trying to get that less than 90 seconds.
Yeah.
You can have them 3 minutes, but really the pressure is on to get it down to a minute if you can.
When we've been recording, it's 2-hour episodes, and then I get them down to an hour. And
it's brutal. You have to cut stuff that's funny. You have to cut stuff that's engaging. I literally cut 15 minutes of continuous laughter, and I feel so bad about that. But on the other hand, you know, it's always a difficult balance. But
but we got it there in the end. But if any of you eagle-eyed people were wondering, why was there a muted gap there that wasn't? Yeah, it was because there was supposed to be a sheep bar there, and I'm gutted that there wasn't. So talking of our growing audience, we have been getting some wonderful emails that, funnily enough, have been going to mine and Adam's spam, but to my husband's actual inbox.
No, I've not even gotten to my spam yet.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
right, we need to figure this out. So Adam is a new hearing this email. We've had a few really gorgeous, wonderful emails. Thank you so much for getting in touch with us. I wanted to read one of them.
Who's it from?
It's from JJ in Washington, D.C. And this email is so great. So great. Okay. Hi. Hello. My name is JJ, and I've been loving y'all's coverage of the Game of Wool and knitting topics generally. I'd love to read George's PhD when it's published. I find the conversation of the de-skilling of art so fascinating. I went to school for theatre design and now teach at the college and high school level, and I try to teach my students as much craft as possible. I promise the subject line is not clickbait.
What was the subject line?
So there's the, I hadn't read the subject line. I forgot about the subject line. Okay. So Grindr did an entire knitwear fashion show? ? Right. I promise the subject line is not clickbait. The gay dating app Grindr partnered with Rainbow Wool, an organisation that saves same-sex attracted rams, to produce an entire line of clothing for a fashion show, All of it is knit and crocheted, and most of the garments look well constructed and with good technique. There is a leather jacket that is a homage to gay leather culture that's particularly stunning with cables and all the right details and zippers, and a tennis set with a cream cabled jumper and knit shorts.
Amazing.
If I'm honest, it's what I thought the game of wool was going to be, not steeped in gay culture specifically, but very well constructed garments with a clear design brief. But that could be my own misconception, as the game of wool is obviously trying to be more Bake Off, less Project Runway. Interesting. I don't know how to end this email, but I had to share this knowledge. Love listening to you guys every week, sometimes twice, and I wish you all the best of luck sorting out the ongoing audio issues. Love y'all, JJ.
How lovely.
Okay, so then we look this up, right?
Are you about to show me some photos?
It's incredible. So this is from the Rainbow Wool website. Did you know that about 1 in 12 sheep is gay?
That doesn't surprise me. It's well documented across loads of species.
Meet the world's first gay flock of sheep. Sadly, gay rams are often sent to slaughter because they can't fulfill a film's breeding role. We rescue them before that happens, giving them a safe home where they can live and love freely. Each year, their wool is crafted into fashion with profits donated to the queer charity LSBD. You can also adopt a gay ram, helping cover food and medicine to keep them happy and healthy for life. Every adoption comes with a digital certificate you can print at home. And so you can go and adopt a gay sheep. And there is a page of, like, it's like Dogs Trust.
Wow.
They're
So have you been swiping left and right on sheep all weekend? Is that what you're telling me, Georgia?
adorable. Madonna, Marvin Gaye, Max Sock, Mark Renton, Prince William, Piccolo.
No, it's not Prince
Willy
William.
Wonka.
How could you miss that? That says Prince William.
William. Every dollar guarantees one gay sheep another day on the farm.
Oh, that's cute.
So there we go. Now you understand why I had to read that email.
It is an amazing email.
Thank you. Thank you for sending the email.
I love finding stuff out like that. Like it is a wonderful thing.
Okay, moving on. Oh yeah, you all emailed and messaged to say that it's called the Exquisite Corpse. And also someone suggested that rather than Mr. Cable, you should be Captain Cable.
Captain Cable. Do you know what? This came out at Munich Knits as well. People were coming up to me saying,
All right, man, Cable.
and I was very surprised and touched by how many people in Germany seem to be listening. Not like that, John. By how many people seem to be listening to the podcast in Germany. So that was wonderful. Thank you for those that are listening there and everywhere. But
Wonderful. Honestly, Munich Knits sounds so much fun.
it was the best.
I can totally imagine how a European yarn festival would give good vibes. I wonder what Dutch ones are like.
That was the incredible thing. I was there and I was sat down, for drinks, dinner, whatever. Every time I was sitting down with 10 people, not 2 people at the table were from the same country.
Yeah.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
Like, it's so refreshing just to have that really clear mix of culture. I just loved it. I felt so alive in that group, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
I really, really found like I'd found my people there. Like it was just wonderful.
That's
it was so nice.
I did an Erasmus study exchange in the Netherlands, in The Hague, which is a super international city. And from the videos and the pictures and like they're going to the bars and everything, and having different people from different countries like that in a really fun environment, it gave me serious FOMO, but also really reminded me of my time in The Hague and actually how beautiful that was. Right.
Should we talk about Game of Wool? Is that next on our list?
Game of Wool. Game of Wool. Yes, it is.
How did you like the episode? Yeah, me
It's
too.
getting weird. There's a weird energy in that room. I don't think it's just because it's getting like, competitive, like the temperature's moving up. People looked annoyed.
Yeah.
Did you get that vibe, or was that just me?
It's a very strange place. Like the one thing I really like about the show now is because there are fewer contestants on it, we've got much more time to get into what they're each doing, the mistakes they make. We've got more time to hear about the judging. We can see more detail. Like this is where the show is going to be more interesting for me, and I think for any other crafters that are interested in it. The difficulty is that we're also seeing, I don't know, the vacuum of energy and there's stuff that isn't in there. Like it feels strange. I'm getting a weird vibe off it as well.
Yeah, I mean, when they stood right at the beginning and they were, so we had the judges and Tom trying to dynamically, excitedly talk about this week's task, and they were looking round at everyone in the room. No one was smiling. I think as well because it was like, yeah, we're going to do amigurumi this week. And initially I was like, amigurumi, that's crochet. But actually it is either. Amigurumi is knitting and crochet. I Googled this. But obviously people associate it with crochet. And
yet again,
also exactly what you said last week, in anticipation, the small circumference items and things, it does lend itself to doing it as a crochet project. And I feel like watching that room, I wondered if the weird energy vibe was people just being like, yeah, great, we've got another crochet week on this knitting show. I mean, maybe people were just tired and maybe I'm reading into it and I don't want to project too much and say, this is what's happening, that, you know, I don't know what's in their minds and what they're thinking. They looked not like, yay, another week on the Game of Wool.
There was definitely a tiredness to some of the contestants. And also the thing that really got my heckles up first in the show was that when they started describing that first task, the previous week they'd announced this is what's coming up next week. The contestants have to knit their
knitted food.
And that's, you know, we talked about that last week.
I called it.
And then I just couldn't believe it. I assumed that was going to be the challenge, knitting on small radius stuff. And then as soon as they get into it, they say you can knit or crochet. Obviously, I don't have a problem with that, but that was totally, again, just calling crochet a kind of knitting. Now, this was an interesting experience for me, actually, at Munich Knits. Did I mention I went to Munich Knits? And one of the amazing things there was that when I talked to people about that at an international level, internationally, that seems to have less of a problem because in other cultures and in other languages, the world of knitting and crochet can be grouped by a single word in some other languages. And it isn't internationally, it's not such a rare thing that crochet is a kind of, if you like, there's an umbrella term of fiber art or a fiber art with a stick. And it's either one stick or two
well,
sticks.
It goes back to the historical thing as well. When a couple of weeks ago I talked about the paper about crochet history, I can link it again, that talked about historically going back like 19th century and before. Again, didn't read the whole article, just the abstract, but it was saying that actually the distinction would be made by talking about one or two sticks.
Yeah, and fair enough. If you want to just say it's absolutely fine, it's fine. Do you know what? It makes me cross, and I'm irritated by it. So that's that.
There are a lot of people who, between my videos on craft and the podcast, have talked about, you know, I research craft terminology or I research particularly crochet. Lots of people who said about crochet terminology, and I do wonder if anybody has any etymological sources or terminology sources around the language of crochet and its relationship to knitting, and actually what's happening historically for us to arrive at this point, and what you describe internationally for people to have like a less stress about it because they're like, no, it's kind of similar, like we use the same word for this. I wonder what's happening on that level. I mean, from the British English perspective and the craft community in the UK, the reaction to this kind of homogenizing has been quite strong.
Yeah,
so I still do think that this is not me trying to give Channel 4 a way out and being like, oh no, we were just going with like the German definition.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're making it for a British audience.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Only showing it in the UK. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Like I'm not giving them a get out of jail free card, but I wonder if there's some interesting stuff there that we could dive into. Yeah, weird vibes this week.
It was a strange vibe. It's a great exercise to do. But again, I felt immediately from the off, they gave the clue as to who was going to be out. Like I knew that within the first.
But I felt like I kind of knew it already just going in. Even before going through into the episode, I feel like the skills from the previous weeks were pointing to the eventuality.
Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, unlike Bake Off, where you don't necessarily know who's going to go each week, I know who's going to be in that final. It is blindingly obvious. And I've got a strong feeling about who's going to win it. It kind of takes away the surprise from the show. And I'd be interested in other people's views on that, whether it's a normal thing and that's fine. You just, you're there for the ride. But
well, maybe they were expecting, like with Bake Off, a little bit more variety where you have people who are really good at bread, people who are really good at meringues, people who are really good at pastry. You have that variety. And yeah, there's the standout people who are just so good at everything. But then maybe they have like one weak spot. And then they really struggle with that week. Or they just have, because there's so many things they have to do. In Bake Off, they have to do 3 different challenges. And there's so many variables with all of those things. And then the weather, all this kind of stuff. Whereas with knitting, we saw that last night with the cardigan. Things can go wrong. But it's like the proof is kind of in the skills and experience of these people. Like it's pretty consistent.
And we see time and time again, I mean, we've seen Holger make a couple of mistakes, but they are, I mean, his massive mistake this time was totally covered up. And I thought that was an interesting point on the judging, actually, because when it came to judging it, I felt like Sheila, her face said she really didn't like that one side of the cardigan was turned inside out. And Di, again, this could be how it was shot and how it was edited, but Di said, "Oh, I love that they've done one side inside out because it makes it reversible, the rest of it." And it was it was potentially a happy accident, but I don't think Sheila felt that at all.
The thing is that when they did the little like talk through the challenge thing, I mean, we're jumping ahead to the wrong challenge. Sorry, guys. Oops. It's fine. We'll go back to amigurumi in a sec. But the challenge, I really kind of wondered when they did the overview, they did say the thing about like, oh, I'd love to see some things inside out. And I felt like that was a weird sort of marrying up where they were trying to find, look, someone's done this thing that we said we'd kind of like to see.
I'm sorry, I
not.
am such a skeptic about the show at this point that I am almost certain they would have filmed that afterwards. I did
wonder.
I feel like you're being led down a garden path so clearly through the show that I can't get past that.
Interesting. I mean, I wondered if it was, I didn't necessarily think that they'd filmed it beforehand, because I do think it is a valid thing to say. If you saw that without knowing what was happening about the inside out thing later on, it did make me think like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, some stitch patterns do look quite nice inside out, and you could have that, and then you'd have to have really good seams, so to make sure that they did the Kitchener stitch like right up the cardigan pieces. We are jumping ahead and we should save this debate.
Shall we go back to amigurumi?
Yes, please. Right. Is this just me? I don't want to level this criticism unless I definitely got it right, but I'm pretty sure that when they talked about amigurumi, I did not hear them mention Japan. Did you hear them mention that it was a Japanese thing or of Japanese origin?
No, I didn't.
Nope. Yeah. I found that it's literally a Japanese word.
Yeah.
Maybe because we're not in Japan, there weren't.
Sorry, Georgia, did you think you were watching some sort of documentary about the heritage of craft? Because there have been a couple of clues.
At least with Shetland, they said it was Shetland.
I think
that's all the only benefit I can see there. I'm not trying to say what they did was okay.
There have been a couple of clues that this isn't the most factually accurate program on television.
I saw something the other day that I hadn't realised, was that when they were explaining knit and crochet in the early episodes, they used AI generated images. I hadn't realised that.
Do you want to know something?
What?
I spoke to the Game of Wool people and I have it on there. So they assured me face to face on a Zoom call that wasn't AI generated, that they face to face, they have told me that was a hand drawn illustration.
From an AI image?
Yeah.
Like, did the illustrator go, oh, I wonder what a crochet stick looks like?
ChatGPT, can you just create me a bad image of this and then I'll trace over it to make it hand drawn? Yeah, there we go. I've had that conversation. It's
after this, I'm going to work in my office, which is in a computer science department, and I would beg to differ.
Well, I know, and the whole internet thinks it's AI, but that is not what Game of Wool says. They can't find who actually originally illustrated it, but they know it was illustrated by hand. There you go.
Okay, well,
again, it doesn't take a lot of research, and
it really doesn't take a lot of research, not least because this is a hilarious thing it's not hilarious, it's really bloody annoying, but it's a thing within the knitting community where we get this example leveled so much. How is a knitting program put that on that material? That's ridiculous.
It's not a knitting program. I mean, to stand up for them, it is so far from a documentary. It is just an entertainment show.
It doesn't matter. I'd expect Love Island to have more accuracy than this.
I think Love Island probably does.
Yeah.
I don't know how far this extends because I grew up thinking that television was a source of truth. And well, because I grew up, and whatever you want to say about BBC laughing. And whatever else.
I'm laughing because it's true. But you expect when you're watching a program. Well, no, right. It's not a fictional program. That's the thing, is it might be entertainment, but entertainment does not mean that in those little segments of we're going to provide you information.
I completely agree. I grew up watching David Attenborough and BBC programs and those things, you assume credibility. They take on credibility, and the medium of television takes on the credibility by association with that. And I understand that the internet is a place where half of everything that is presented as fact is wrong and you need to do your own research if you're going to quote stuff. But the problem for me is that this is a television program on a big mainstream channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, should we talk about some knitted food now?
So, I have to take this as entertainment because otherwise...
Knitted or crocheted food?
Knitted or crocheted, amigurumi without eyes. I mean, that would have been a useful thing to explain as well, why it wasn't friendly amigurumi. Anyway, shall we stop getting so wound up? I feel like I'm getting too cross at this point.
Okay.
Georgia, at this point, I feel like I need to explain. I want to add our usual little advert in the middle. And what I want to tell all of our listeners is that you and I are just dealing with pure rage at this point. I want to explain exactly why, because our podcast provider, which is riverside.fm, has totally fallen over on us mid-recording. I know that I've got a perfect connection to the internet, and the studio has literally crashed mid-recording for us. I want to make sure if you're ever thinking of setting up a podcast, I never, ever, ever would recommend riverside.fm to anyone, not my worst enemy. This has been a pure nightmare and is so stressful.
I feel like crying.
And I just want to make sure that no one else ever uses this technology.
So there's a kind of an understanding that I've developed the more time that I've been around computer scientists. A big part of my work is an area of research called human-computer interaction. Part of that is about user experience, and they shorten it down to UX. Dima and I have this funny running joke, oh, it's bad UX. And I used to think, before meeting Dima and before being around all these computer scientists, that when computers didn't work or some software was really bugging out or not working, I would blame myself. And I would think that it was my fault and I just wasn't really techy enough, or that I'd done something wrong. And then the more I spent time with computer scientists, the more I found out that actually this is when things are not designed well and it's bad UX. And so when something happens, I'm now in a lucky enough position to have that understanding where I look at something and go, oh, this is bad UX. This is bad UX. The number of times I have had to say bad UX when I've been dealing with this software, the reason that we record on Mondays and you get the podcast on Thursdays is because of this software.
You're probably sitting there listening and thinking, why on earth are you still on it? I will explain that it is too stressful and difficult for us to change and shift all of the podcast streams over on top of the mountain of work that it takes to actually do this in the first place.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely our intention. No, Riverside haven't offered any money off. We are just going to have to jump ship, but it will come after we finish this series.
Yeah. You know, this week, my backup recording stuff was at my office. So there's a possibility that you might be hearing the first half of this podcast via an awful phone recording. Apologies for that.
And I mean, this is going to be the most enormous audio shock for people to
Have
have
you got
gone
any
through.
sugar?
Yeah.
Can I just have some sugar? I just need to
We'll do
jump
it.
up and down instead of cry.
So cross. So cross.
Oh, I love a German biscuit. I know that on some level it's not healthy to regulate yourself with sugar, but I do. It's not the way I've always been. I had a very difficult relationship with food for a long time. I thankfully developed a different one, which allows me to go, I need a biscuit right now. It's so crumbly.
Right, I'm just going to do the talking because Georgia's stuffing her face full of sugar at this point. So
I'm sorry. You might get some crumbles. If anyone's got that thing where they don't like eating, I'm sorry.
You'll get some extra ASMR of Georgia having a crunchy Leberkuchen. Well, the sugar at least is
I'll
crunchy
cover
on
the
top.
microphone.
Right, so I'm going to tell you what I thought of about the arigurumi foods that everyone made. Basically, I thought everyone did a good job. It was blindingly obvious to me that Tracy wasn't going to come through in this. She's been trailed as an expert crocheter, and then they talked about texture, and then as soon as she said she was going to do everything in double crochet, for the US, that means a single crochet stitch. And then what she did just made a very bland-looking bowl of food as a result.
Sorry to interrupt, but they explicitly asked her, is everything going to be scaled? And she went, yes. And they're like, that pasta to me doesn't look very scaled. Oh, I suppose, well, maybe it's a bit bigger.
They then held up a butterfly of pasta, which was maybe 10 times the size of a normal farfalle that you'd have.
Yeah. Sorry, take over. I'm going to take another bite.
So for me, it didn't get talked about in this way, but there is a concept when you look at visual images, and to some way it's an artistic concept, of fractals. Fractal is a mathematical shape, or it's a graph, technically, where as you scale up the image, the pattern repeats and repeats and repeats infinitely. And so it doesn't matter how far you zoom in, the image basically stays the same, that there is an infinite level of detail as far as you go into it. And fractals are a really interesting concept because fractals within images, although that's a mathematical concept and the famous one is the Mandelbrot set, actually it comes up in art, and it's an easy way to understand the quality of images. So if you look at a cloud, for example, a cloud, if you draw a childish version of a cloud, it has a single outline.
When you say quality, do you mean like the resolution of it?
I'm
The
talking about
aesthetic?
an aesthetic quality. But as you zoom into a cloud at every level, when you go further and further into it, still has continued levels of detail. And it's similar with a tree. If you look at a tree, when you zoom into a tree, you see clusters of leaves and branches, and then you can see a leaf. And if you look at a leaf, you can see individual veins on a leaf. The fact that you have that sort of gradient of texture through zoom levels is one of the ways to create real depth to images. It's not the only way to make something artistic or anything, but if you're looking at something like photorealism, that is one of the ways that you use a technique to be able to make something photorealistic. You add detail by adding more and more and more texture at every level within an image. Step back for a second. This is where Holger was on a completely different scale to Tracy, because Tracy was crocheting foods using mono texture and mono color, whereas what Holger was doing was adding more and more detail at smaller and smaller levels with everything that he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's the same concept of adding this fractal-like quality to what you're doing. They said they wanted to see realistic food. The way that you make that realistic is by adding the layers of detail so that as you sort of zoom in and you get closer to something, you get to see more and more. That's what makes it realistic. And I think that's why Holger's was on another level. And that's why Tracy's wasn't, because it had these mono themes within it. It was monotextural, mono colors. And that's why it didn't sing in the same way. I want to shout out to Simon as well, because I absolutely loved Simon's bacon. I thought
it was amazing. And I don't even eat bacon.
And it was really refreshing as well to hear him talk about, he said, winging it sounds derogatory.
I'm glad he said this.
But freeform adds difference. And that was really critical. And that's what made his bacon. It was perfect because he added all of that color and texture just as he was feeling it. And it gave it the organic nature of food as well, the way he constructed it, in a totally different way to Isaac, who did knit his bacon very, very flat. And it didn't look like bacon in the way that Simon's did.
I did not expect when we started this podcast that I would be Googling bacon, the Battle of the Bacons. I was thinking, okay, well, we know that Isaac has that sort of leniency towards America and he's studied out there. And I was like, yeah, that is more of an American, like rasher style of bacon. And then I was thinking about how pink it was.
It was uncooked bacon.
It was uncooked bacon. Maybe I was just looking too far because I wanted to give Isaac a way out. But I was thinking it wasn't that bad. And to be fair, I did find some pink looking bacon that was cooked, but was an American style bacon that did look more pink. I feel like there is sometimes with these tasks, there's a little bit of ambiguity in terms of actually what they're looking for when they say realistic. In previous weeks, maybe the feedback hadn't been so pointed. Maybe they thought that they could get away with like a cartoony style thing and that would be okay because that's kind of in the style of amigurumi. Magnets though, Isaac did have the magnets. I thought that was very cool. There was a very satisfying break apart.
That was lovely. That was an extra thing that he added in, but then you don't know how that weighs on the judging. It's really difficult that they don't really talk enough about the judging criteria, I feel like.
Yeah,
and it's
that's what I
difficult-
mean.
And it's difficult to know because they see something that, you know, you look at Isaac's and you think, okay, it wasn't up there in some ways, but on the other hand, you did this extra thing like adding magnets and you could have a bagel that came in half. And that's a cool thing, and therefore we like it.
The top of the bread did look very good.
Yeah, that you don't get seeds evenly over every bagel.
No, it was like a seeded oated top, and he basically just hadn't fully finished both sides of it. Yeah, so the fact that they made such a laborious point over like, well, he doesn't finish things, I did think that was a bit far.
I want to call out Lydia because I think she did the cleverest of all of them in terms of making something, because you've understood that there is a timed task and you are going to potentially run out of time. How do you manage that? And what she did was she constructed her pies first and then she constructed her mash. What she left at the end was individually crocheting peas. So she knew that she could make most of her stuff, and then whatever else she did, she was crocheting peas, and it didn't matter if she had 10 peas or 100 peas. But
it was very self-aware.
It was very, very intelligently done to like just manage and make sure that. But everyone finished that first task. You know, there were
apart from Isaac with his seeds on his bagel. The thing that I really liked when Diane Sheila questioned Lydia about the mash and we'd like to see more detail in the mash and maybe a different kind of texture, and she was going to brush it, brushing becoming very popular since Ailsa's graffiti. With the pie and mash thing, I like the self-awareness where she said this was the best way I could create mash. And I did appreciate that sort of like self-awareness, because I think sometimes when this feedback is delivered partway through, or Tom comes and says like, are you sure that that's going to be detailed enough for them, or something along those lines, it does throw people off. And I welcomed that for Lydia. She was like, no, this is what I'm going to do because it's what I thought of.
Yeah, interestingly, there was a comment online that she could have or should have made it with mohair or something, or
I
added
did wonder
mohair.
that.
And she did use a strand of mohair in there. Again, would have been fascinating to see that, but it's just that the lighting on the show didn't pick up enough of it. And obviously, I mean, you can use more strands of mohair. With really brushing that, I guess you could have made that look really steamy.
One little bone to pick as well. This is no reflection on the knitters, I don't think. This is very much down to editing, very much down to producing. When they went to speak to Isaac about the bagel, which, yes, did have a lot of like figuring out patterns, maths stuff, I think the words Tom used was like, yeah, it looks very scientific, very engineering. And then when they went to Ailsa, they were like, perfectionist Ailsa, detail-orientated Ailsa. And it really irked me. So the feedback that Isaac got was like, yeah, there's a lot of maths gone into this, there's a lot of engineering. And then the feedback that Ailsa got was like, it's almost too neat. We need it to be a bit more abstract for it to come alive. And it's almost like the people who are doing the commentary or the producing don't have any more knitting awareness to say anything more about that. So they just completely borrow from all of the judging comments and what they're going to use in the clips to put into the voiceovers. And so they couldn't come up with anything better than framing the woman as being a perfectionist and the man as being an engineer.
I hadn't heard that when it was on screen, but you're completely right that there's potentially a very gendered undertone to that. And it
really
shocking.
pissed me off.
But,
and I mean...
Well, the other one that got me
Sorry,
was...
did you just interrupt me whilst I was having a feminist rant? Did the engineer just interrupt me? Sorry, I just had to do that. We interrupt each other all the time. It's fine. Sorry.
Not anymore, we don't.
Yeah, no, it pissed me off. And it reminded me a little bit of when people say, and I'm going to say this phrase, and then I'm going to unpack it. When people say, oh, when a woman does it, it's craft, but when a man does it, it's art. For all kinds of reasons, I don't agree with that statement, but the sentiment of when a woman does it versus a man does it and the characteristics of it. The reason that I don't necessarily agree with is because it's often talked about when we're talking about fibre crafts. The thing is that craft is much broader than that. And actually the history of craft is representative of a lot of very male-dominated crafts as well. And so disregard for craft goes far beyond the exclusion of women. It goes into lots of other different corners of the world. And I don't necessarily like the hierarchy of craft and art thing, which I've talked about on various other points and will do in the future. But that sentiment, it did feel very gendered and I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, also they described Simons as engineered.
Yes.
Again, and that was totally a gendered term because they didn't use that to describe any of how the women had constructed stuff. So, yeah, I completely agree with that. But also, the men are on that show as numbers. We all know that if you go out into any kind of maker community in the fibre arts, you won't find that concentration of men that we're seeing on the show. Like, it's not realistic. But they are there to show and tell a story. Again, it's unfortunate that one of the stories they seem to want to tell is about gender, but in the wrong way.
And I just want to emphasise to Isaac, Simon and Holger, that's not to say that you're any part of that at all. Getting the vibes from the three of you, that's not something that you would have wanted at all.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with calling out the maths and the engineering and all the rest of it.
But I don't think they've said that about... Well, to be fair, they might have said it about the swimsuit with Lydia. I can't remember exactly. But they certainly didn't labour the fact that there was lots of maths that went into it and it was really scientific.
Whereas the one thing that stood out to me about Lydia's swimsuit was the engineering behind it, because that was immaculate.
Yeah.
It was incredibly done. The three-dimensional sculpting of that item was just...
I think they did say engineered.
Sorry, did you interrupt me?
Yeah, I know. I'm allowed to.
Equal opportunities for interrupting on this podcast.
Equitable.
Right,
anyway.
That's enough of food.
Okay.
The next task was, in 10 hours, to produce a slouchy cardigan. There were 3 teams of 2. So in a pair, they had to create a slouchy cardigan with, obviously, chunky wool and chunky needles. That's the only way to do it at this point, on what looked like 12mm needles. We had the 3 teams, A, B, and C. The first one was Tracy and Isaac, then it was Holger and Elsa, and then it was Lydia and Simon. They had 10 hours to create a highly textured cardigan. They were told they were adapting an existing pattern. They had to use at least 3 stitch techniques. They said at the beginning that the judging criteria were clear, clean stitch definition. So that's what we were giving at the start.
They keep saying that they're adapting an existing pattern. There's some vagueness, some vagary around the language there that is making me wonder actually what information they do get given.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to understand more of, and maybe we'll get an interview with some of the contestants. George and I want to do...
non-disclosure agreements have ended.
Exactly.
Which I understand is a very typical thing for these kind of whittled down programs.
Of course, but we're going to get our hands on them one day. So one of the things that struck me about that, they will obviously have like a stitch count to work from so that they knew how big to make the garment. One of the things that I learned about cables by making my own cable garments is that obviously you get a grossly different gauge with a cable than stockinette. Now, I want to call out a book that's up on my shelf, actually, Nora Gowen's Knitted Cable Source Book. It is just the most beautiful book to go through. If you love cables, this is the thing. But within it, one of the wonderful things that she has is she uses this SSE, stockinette stitch equivalent, or stocking stitch equivalent.
Oh.
So when she's got a cable which sits across 70 or 80 stitches, it might have a stockinette stitch equivalent of 50. So you know, without swatching, if you're going to not swatch, and let's not talk about that, but you know that there's a very different gauge from something. And I feel like, that's somewhere where Simon and Lydia came unstuck, is that theirs pinched too much around the arm because they probably hadn't adjusted their stitch count for the fact that these cables are going to suck up and draw in the material so much and turn a slouchy cardigan into a well-fitted cardigan.
Yeah, they were kind of checking around it a bit, but not quite enough to... I love the cardigan that they made. I also enjoyed the banter between the groups and the fact that Simon was going on a little sort of recce to suss it out and then delivered it back. What's the crack? Lydia called it. So that was funny. But I think even in the nature of the division of the groups, it didn't really feel like a wild card of like, oh, who's going home? It felt like a bit of a setup so that somebody was going to go home.
You think the groups were selected to make it easy to pick who was going to go home?
Yeah. Well, it just felt a bit not quite fair. The writing was on the wall as soon as they said the group names.
The three strongest knitters and crocheters within the group are Holger, Elsa, and Lydia. I don't think there's any debate about that. Those, if you had to pick three finalists, it's going to be those
Simon, your
three.
bacon was excellent.
But yeah, I'm Simon, loved your bacon. But I think those are the three strongest, that they have the most experience, best attention to detail, all the rest of it. Those are the three clear winners. I mean, yeah.
And we know that Simon can go. He's made some really beautiful stuff. Also, Isaac's really great. I just feel like Isaac got a raw deal. Because I still feel like Isaac could not even surprise us. He has continued to surprise us. And I almost feel like the editing is sometimes a little bit negative towards Isaac.
Yeah, you say, Isaac came up with a nice idea. And on the back of the cardigan, what he did was he used knit and purl texture to create a picture of a smiley face. And it's a cute thing to do.
It's also very much his generation. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. But that kind of smiley face thing is very much around at the moment because it's like Y2K, revival, like 90s. It's a thing.
But the problem is that it wasn't texture. I mean, it was using a very, very small amount of texture to create a picture, and it wasn't what the judges asked for. And I would also say that if you wanted to do that and make it more dramatic, you absolutely can, because you could have done that picture with texture. You could have outlined it with a cable, for example. You could have included moss stitch or other more textured stitches to make it a more dramatic picture. But it was just simply knit and purl.
Does this come down to as well, though, the guidance that they had? Yes, it's Texture Week, but I feel like we found out from the little judges and Tom having a chat that they wanted loads and loads of texture. But how much was that communicated to the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it was like they wanted to see these different techniques, but then they didn't get them. So Elsa and Holger, really cool construction idea that made a lot of sense. That wasn't like, oh, I've got to do all these different pieces. It did make a lot of sense. Obviously, we had a bit of a mixeroo there. Which, to be fair, I mean, Lydia expressed her feelings afterwards, but didn't necessarily agree with them winning. And I do understand that because they did so on Inside Out. But at that point, the judges did not know if it was intentional or not.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, you saw Sheila's face there, and Sheila looked like she really, really didn't like it. And Di was just all enthusiastic about it.
Because they'd said that thing before. And I think they were looking and hoping for it to be a design feature. And to be fair, if their seaming had not been as exquisite as it was, then they would know.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. They'd done Kitchener Stitch, and I feel like Kitchener Stitch is not understood well enough, and I wish more people would understand Kitchener Stitch and use it, because it is totally seamless joining for knitting. And it means that there is literally no way of seeing where the join is. It is totally seamless. You literally create a line of knitting in between two other lines of knitting. A couple of weeks ago, we saw a little 3-minute or 3-second tutorial on what a treble was and the difference in elasticity between a treble and a double. I feel like that would have been a beautiful moment to showcase Kitchener. It's such a simple technique, but it is transformative in terms of how you can join knitting together. When I knit jumpers bottom up, which is a technique that I'm enjoying and leaning into more, I love it when you get to the shoulders and then you can kitchen them together and there's literally just no evidence of it.
Having this conversation is making me it's reminding me earlier. I'm almost finished with this new vest that is my nice little fun chunky knit.
You promised us you'd finish it by this week.
I doesn't have the ribbing on it, but it's like I need to do the neck and the sleeve. Sadly, it's not finished yet. But when we opened my laptop, the video that was open from last night on YouTube was a 3-needle bind off tutorial. In my defense, I know how to do a 3-needle bind off. What happened was I have not done it for a long time. And so my brain was switching between mostly do Kitchener stitch because I really enjoy that, or do a blanket stitch, or do an Italian bind off, stretchy bind off. And all of them were racing around my head and I couldn't remember, wait, which one's the one with the 3-needle? And then I looked at it and went, oh, that's fine.
But I think that's something that we all do. Certainly,
Kitchener stitch. People look it up all the time just to double check. Oh, which one is the first? Oh, yeah, it's that way.
Exactly. And it's like when you say make one right and make one left, how many people get confused between that and have to look it up every time? Like if you've not done it in your previous knit, if you're not a truly expert knitter, every time I go to make one right, make one left, I have to look it up and make a little note in my book and then it's done.
So judging wise, Simon and Lydia, they really liked the cardigan. They mentioned the sleeves were maybe a little bit too tight.
Yeah, they got the tape measures out and they were too tight.
Yeah, they also said that the eyelet pattern around the base had ballooned the fabric out as well.
Interesting. That it was a great spot, I felt like.
We are definitely getting a raised judging thing, which is why I think that if that seaming down the middle of the cardigan had not been so perfect with the Kitchener stitch, they absolutely would have gone to town on that. But it was convincing enough with it being inside out.
That it was intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that we're getting more judging. It's fantastic to see that insight. I assume they did that level of judging all the way through the competition. It's just that there's no time for it in the edit. And the other thing that I would say, they asked Lydia about, have you seen what the others are doing? And she said, I don't want to look at the others. If I look at the others, I will catastrophize. And I really felt for that. Like it is difficult. And I've knitted under, as you know, time conditions and with other people. And it is a big deal not to get freaked out. And I know there are loads of people that hate the idea of competitive knitting. You don't have to competitive knit. It's a thing. Like if you want to do it, do it. And if you don't, you don't. That's the whole point of this craft. For the people that are doing it, there is a mentality towards it. You've got to lock in on, I am focused on my thing. I'm not going to be bothered by what other people do. You just have to sit there and do it. And I had a lot of respect for her. And then it was fun that Simon went and had that moment with Holger. Holger says, get your fat ass off my wool. That's charming Holger as always. But yeah, I really felt for Lydia. That was a nice moment.
It was nice. I agree. Yeah, I like that the proximity of everyone, the more time they've been spending together, there is some more fun banter. Like I think people are gelling. And I almost wonder if the weird vibe that we got when all of them were just at the beginning of the episode, I wonder what their group chat was like in the week. They were just like, another crochet challenge? We didn't sign up for this. Oh gosh, to be a fly on the wall. So big knitter, or we had a wonderful email that suggested, this is my new fave, Woolly Mammoth.
I think that's a fantastic name, Woolly Mammoth.
And I'm really sorry, I didn't check who had emailed us about this. Woolly Mammoth. Yes, our Woolly Mammoth of the week was Simon. And to be honest, not Simon, that's the problem. It was Holger. I know Holger's was great. But I did think that Simon could.
Well, I thought they wanted to give it to Simon because they put that clip in at the beginning of him saying, I've not been big knitter yet and I want one of those badges. And they seem to make that as a story, but presumably because they knew that it was going to Holger in the end. And that's why they made it.
Could have been his chance with that bacon.
In terms of quality, like I think the bowl of noodles had it over the bacon.
I mean, yeah, I suppose. It was pretty good. And then our cast off, we kind of knew it was coming. Tracy was our cast off. When Tracy was doing her little post challenge 1 interview, there was a moment where she said, I take the comment that it's a big bowl of mess, but that's what a bowl of seafood pasta is. And I was thinking of your cousin, and you had that thing last week. I'm pretty sure your cousin would probably not think that a seafood pasta just had to be a big bowl of mess.
No, I stand up for Jake. He's a professional cook for decades now. He can be a really difficult person to cook for, an intimidating person to go and cook for. And he says, I always love food that's made for me because it's made with love and that's all that matters. If Jake was here, he'd say, like, I don't care if it's messy. If it's food and it's made with care and love, that's what he'd want.
Fair.
In terms of fit for purpose, Tracy's bowl of pasta, of seafood pasta, was a brilliant thing. If its function is going to be maybe a toy, and a lot of arigurumi is, if it's a toy for children and to play with, it worked well. It was absolutely fine. But that wasn't what the judges asked for. The judges asked for something that was sort of artistically, aesthetically looking like food. And that's where it came apart. That's where it disconnected from reality. She made something that was great, but it wasn't what they asked for. The last thing I'd say is that the one thing I'm really not enjoying now is that although there is more time for the judging, I don't feel there's the passion and energy in the judging. I was assured that the judges would come alive in terms of the amount of personality and so on that you're seeing. And I'm not feeling it. Like, Tom has this level of energy and bounciness on screen, and I love that. I don't love everything about what he says and what he does, but I do love the energy he brings to the show, and I appreciate that. I don't feel like I'm getting dynamism from the judges, and I feel that's a shame.
I don't know. I like the judges. At this point, my distrust is much more with the editing than with anything else. And if they are judging for hours, if that's what we've heard is happening, and these are the bits that they are going with to create their narrative arc where they pick these weird criticisms, because we know that Isaac's done bacon and we know that Simon's done bacon. So we're going to leverage that criticism and really say, this bacon, too simplistic, too flat, like not accurate. Then you're going to cut between Isaac and Simon and their faces when you see Isaac's disappointment when Simon got the bacon right and he realizes what I was going for didn't tick their boxes this time on this specific occasion.
Yeah.
And then really laboring the point on like, well, Isaac really doesn't. I just feel like sometimes the editing is having to scrape the barrel to find the right things to construct their narrative. And my distrust is more so with them than actually Di and Sheila, who have an incredible pedigree when it comes to knitting. I'm not saying that at all that you are suggesting that they don't have an incredible pedigree. My distrust instinctively is with the production of it. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, I'm totally with you and I totally understand that. I'm not the most experienced knitter. I haven't spent decades in this industry. I don't know. But I would struggle to think of another pair of judges that have worked together at that level of skill of Di and Sheila. They are the perfect judges in the respect of actually technically understanding the knitting they're presented with. Where it falls down, and maybe Di and Sheila are rewatching this and they're hoping for series 2 that they understand more about what they have to do in that process of creating energy on screen when they're doing the judging. And maybe that's part of how the production works.
Like if we look back at early Bake Off, Mary and Paul probably might have not have had that same kind of dynamic energy. They wouldn't have like sunk into it just yet.
It's absolutely fascinating. Go and watch series 1 of Bake Off, because there are long periods of literally no voiceover, and it's just music, and it's just like watching people baking, and it's a really, really different show.
Interesting.
So like shows do grow over time, and we're all hopeful that this continues to grow.
Well, that's the thing. Do you still think we're going to have a series 2?
I don't know at this point. I don't know.
It's weird. I wonder, it goes back to what you said last week about your mum and your mum not being a crafter but really enjoying the show. And I do wonder if non-crafters will be really enjoying the show.
Yeah, if it makes it more approachable. And, the other great thing is that we hear that people are engaging with the craft and saying, I want to learn to knit because I've seen it on Game of Wool or whatever, or learn to crochet or whatever. And that's a wonderful thing. We all want to celebrate that. So
yeah, next week, I can't remember what's next week. You're going to have to tell me again.
Next week, we're going to see knitted jewellery and a lace light shade. So I'm really excited about that. But you are pulling some faces, Georgia. So.
Okay, again, it comes back around to weird distrust of things. I'm just really hoping that it's going to be lace knitting and not actual lace making.
Can you imagine? Or tatting.
I'm wondering if it is lace knitting, if they're going to make it very clear lace knitting is not lace making. I just wonder if they're just going to not talk about that, or if they're going to AI generate some image or show pictures of lace rather than lace knitting, or if it's going to be actual lace.
I think we can almost guarantee at this point it is not going to be an accurate representation of whatever craft they're going to portray. The question is it going to be fun? I love knitting lace. I mean, obviously the thing they can't do is blocking, and lace needs blocking. But I think they've done a clever trick there, because it looks like they're creating lace panels for a light shade. And the brilliant thing about that is you're going to then stretch it over a canvas or stretch it around a frame, which is going to do the effect of blocking for you.
And then sit in the dark, yeah.
So that's a wonderful way to do that. Knitted jewellery, I'm also super excited by. It's something I've come across recently. Knitting and crochet jewellery is just absolutely beautiful. I love it.
Simon, though, this is the other fear thing, that he said something about like, I'm doing some Viking knitting.
Yeah.
And I was like, which other craft are we talking about here?
Careful what you're saying about Viking knitting.
Yeah, exactly. Are we talking about knot binding? Are we talking about something else? That's my main thing right now, is just like how much misinformation is going out, which is not what I expected with this show. When it started, I was thinking, obviously, they're going to do their due diligence. But apparently, no.
Well,
so who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
I hope people don't go after Simon. He's using that in a metaphorical sense.
I'm not saying Simon, and I'm sure he probably, the little clip that they take, this is not a thing on Simon. What I'm saying is, like, I'm wondering what the context of that is going to be next week. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if he does just say that in passing, my belief is really that actually there was all this other bit before where Simon was going, oh yeah, it's actually called null binding, but sometimes people call it Viking knitting, and then they just take the that's
the kind of thing that's what they do in the edit.
Oh no, let's just not talk about null binding. Like, that's too complicated. Like, no, you don't need to know about that. That's where my jading is right now.
You're very jaded today.
I'm super jaded today, not least because the podcast broke halfway through and my lead can worked for a little bit, but I don't know.
That's the problem with sugar. Once you start, can't stop. I got lots of questions in Germany about the t-shirts that I wear. They are all available on my T-Mill site if you're looking for Christmas gifts to give to someone, or give to yourself.
To knit or not to knit is never the question. I just realised it's the Hamlet skull.
Yeah. That's literally made from that reel. So yeah, if you want them, then you find them through my Instagram. They're on my T-Mill site. You can buy them anywhere over the world.
I don't have merch.
Not yet.
No.
We'll get some.
Not yet. Cable Man.
It's on my list. It's on my list to make us some merch.
Captain Cable.
I had another specific request at the weekend from one of my fellow makers of nipple tassels, who wanted a t-shirt with a slogan, which I think is magnificent, about not counting your stitches and your number of drinks at the same time, and how that can go wrong. I think there's a lovely vibe there.
There's a lovely vibe. Yeah, if there are any particular standout quotes that you'd like to see on a t-shirt or a mug, you can email us at podcast@yarnlibrary.co.uk.
Wasn't it .com?
Nah. .com is taken.
That's right. Anyway, it's been a blast.
It has been.
We'll speak to you next week.
I'm trying to find something witty to end with, but my frustration is still like,
Cut.
You've been listening to Yarn Library Podcast with Adam Cleveley at Cleveley Knits and me, Georgia Denham at Tulip Pearl. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share and subscribe. And if you didn't,